Everyone, I'm going to introduce the Threadripper build I'm going to be doing over the next week or so. You'll see I've got most of the parts here already. The only thing I'm really waiting for now is the CPU block. But I'll run you through the components I'm going to use and show you a little bit about the water cooling setup I'm going to build. The first thing I've got is my CPU, which is a Ryzen Threadripper 1950X, so a 16 core 32 thread model, and that's what I'm basing this build around. If you saw my last few videos, I was deciding which fans to go with, and I decided, as you can probably see, to go with the full-on RGB. So with that in mind, I've got RGB everything. I've gone for the RGB Trident Z memory that everyone seems to be using these days. This is actually the 3466 MHz edition, not a 3200. The latency is a bit higher on this, but it should run about the same speed. And this was actually about £80 cheaper than the 3200 CAS14, and this is CAS16 3466 MHz. So a bit of a bargain there. The motherboard I'm using is again full RGB. I've gone for the Gigabyte Aorus Gaming 7, which is full RGB, as you've probably seen in the pictures. But I just like the aesthetic of this, not just the RGB, but I like the fact that the M2 slots have got cases or covers, so you can hide them. And that's really good for this build because I want a really nice clean look. That will help me accomplish that. And it meant that I could get slightly cheaper SSDs and NVMe drives and not have to worry about them having an ugly blue PCB showing on the motherboard. That's the motherboard. I'll go through all these components as I install them into the case. The case here, you can see behind me. The case here is a Watercooled P7C1 or Project 7 C1, and I'm going to have an interesting setup here. I'm doing water cooled. I've actually done some mods to this already, or rather had someone do some mods for me. I've got a push-pull 360mm rad in the front. You can see I've already got fans on it, and I've got a 240 at the top. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to have a rad on the rear, and I'll come to that. I'll explain that in a separate video, but that is actually the third radiator just here. Well, I just want to explain my water cooling setup. So it is going to be water cooled. I'm going to have 3 radiators, and you're probably wondering where's the space. If I put the shroud on, and you can probably see there's not an awful lot of space in this case once you've got the radiators and the fans fitted. So there's not a lot of space here between where the board would stop, which would be about here, and the fans. So where am I going to put the radiator? Well, I had considered laying it along the shroud like this. There's just enough room for a GPU, but it won't look very nice. And if I do want to expand to 2 GPUs in the future, I won't be able to, because there just won't be space to do that. So I'm actually going to put it under the shroud, and I've measured this out, and it's going to go lengthways. Okay, so I'm going to show you the design of this build and how I'm going to do the loop. Now, I'm not mounting the radiator on the shroud because it will use too much space up, as I said before. What I'm actually going to do is mount it in the case lengthways. Now you can see here I've actually got a pipe there with a series of rotary connections ready to join onto the inlet of this pump. So I'm going to drill some holes, mount the pump at the bottom of the case. There's just enough room there for a PSU, and that's going to be the start of my build. I'm going to have the loop order as follows. I'm going to have the pump going into this radiator. You'll notice the pump, ports at the bottom, and that's on purpose. It will make it harder to bleed, but it will give me a nicer aesthetic, because all of this will be under the shroud you saw a moment ago. So the shroud will cover a lot of the tubes, and that's what I want. I want as clean a build as I can get with as few tubes visible as possible. And I'm going to explain how I'm going to do that. Part of that is having a rear radiator, but that's not really for that reason. But the loop order is going to be pump to the radiator. The radiator will then go up through the shroud to the GPU. The GPU will go to the CPU. The CPU will go into the rear port of this radiator, so the back of the case, and the front port of this radiator will then come down in a hardline tube and exit the case here, which will then be hidden cleverly, and I'll go over that in another video, as I say, behind the rear radiator. So it will come out of the back of the case and join onto the rear radiator. The rear radiator will be attached to the back of the case and have an import here of a hardline tubing coming back to the pump. So that is the loop order I'm going to use. There should only be the tubes visible from the shroud to the GPU, the GPU to the CPU to this radiator, and then this radiator to outside of the case. So we should have a fairly nice, clean build. I'll keep you posted on this. I'm still waiting for the CPU block to arrive, so I can't complete the build, but the next thing I'm going to do is drill the holes in the case to mount the pump and the various holes to mount the rear radiator. So I'll do the rear radiator in a separate video so you can see my reasoning for it. So that's it for now. I'll keep posted and do some updates over the next couple of days. After I've drilled the holes, I might record that to make it a bit more interesting, record myself drilling the holes, and then I'm going to do a test loop as well. So before I've got any components in there, I'm actually going to run some water through the radiators just to check the loop works. And all I'll be doing is skipping out the 2 blocks. So I'll be testing the entire loop without CPU block and the GPU block in a completely empty case. If there's any leaks, well, it's not going to be the end of the world. The only thing that can possibly get damaged is going to be the pump. So hopefully I'll get that up in the next video. Although, actually no, it'll be 2 videos time. The next video is going to be me explaining the rear radiator, because that's something that some people really frown at and throw stuff at the screen as soon as I say mount a radiator externally. I do have my reasons. Stay tuned for the next video and I will explain them. So I shall see you next time.